Really, that's what we've been on about over these last days. And as was said the other day, we still have to answer this question. What is it that's present when stillness and movement meet? But in order to answer that question, we have to resolve that paradox. And that paradox, in a nutshell, is: how can we be empty and full at the same time? Or, even more perplexing, how can things be real and unreal at the same time? And we can see from these stories of late, and this little gem of a story just told poses a question for us that has to be reconciled. A little paradox, you might call it. So again, to add to the chemistry of the stories of these last days, let's see what these two little stories evoke for us. The one little story is about a young man who came to hear of a great sage in his village, a great saint. And so he went along to seek his counsel. And when he came into the aura of this great saint, he felt that peace and tranquility that is in the aegis of such a one as this. And he sat with him. And at the end of the period of time in his presence, he said to the great sage, Master, could you please tell me how I can find God? And the great sage says, well, this is a very difficult question. Perhaps you wouldn't mind coming back tomorrow and bringing with you a bowl of milk, and I'll answer your question for you. So the young man went away, and the next day he came along to the great sage carrying the bowl of milk with him, and the sage invited him to sit as he had done the day before. But then, as they were sitting, the great sage put his fingers into the bowl of milk, and he began to stir them around and look at his fingers, and then stir them some more, and then he put his whole hand in and began to look at his fingers, and the young man was sitting there wondering what on earth the sage was doing, until he finally couldn't contain himself anymore, and he said, Guruji, what is it you're doing? And the old sage said, well, I'm told that there's butter in milk, and I'm trying to find it. Oh, the young man laughed, and he said, but Guruji, you know that you have to make milk into yogurt, and then only then can you churn it into butter. And the master said, well, I believe that I've answered your question. Go home, make yogurt and butter. And then there's that other story about that day laborer called Ranjit. Now, times were very hard, and Ranjit was not able to find the work that was able to allow him to earn a few coins to put food on the table for his family. But it so happened that his dear wife earned a little money as the chambermaid of the princess of the realm. Each day she would go to the palace and clean the passageways in which the princess of the realm lived. But one day Ranjit's wife woke up very ill, and she said, Ranjit, I am too ill to go to my work today, you will have to dress as a woman and go and do my work. Otherwise, we will have no food to put on our table." So Ranjit took one of his wife's saris and dressed himself up and went off. And with his mop in hand, he proceeded to mop the passageways of the princess's chambers. But during the course of his work, the princess had taken her bath, and she came out of her bath to return to her dressing chamber in all her splendid nakedness. And when Ranjit saw this being, her alabaster skin, so white, so smooth, her long dark tresses flowing down her back, he was smitten, instantly and totally smitten with her beauty. Well, his wife the next day was well enough to go back to her work, but Ranjit was not the same. He spent the days and nights sighing. He could not eat, he could not sleep. All he could think of, and in his mind's eye, see this beautiful, beautiful being. His wife could see that there was something very wrong, and she kept pestering, "What is it, husband? What is it?" And finally he had to confess to her that he was smitten. And he said, "I think I'm going to die if I don't speak to her, if I don't see her again." Well, his wife, although she was shocked at this, she could not afford to lose her husband. So she decided to intervene. So she went to the princess and made the confession, "Please, won't you help me? My husband is in love with you. Will you speak with him?" The princess said, "But you know this is not allowed. I am not allowed to speak to any man." "Oh," said Ranjit's wife, "please help me." The princess said, Well, you know that on the 4th day of every week I go to the temple to feed the saints and give alms. Tell your husband to join those who gather at the temple, and this will be my opportunity to speak with him." So when Ranjit's wife went back and told him, Ranjit was overjoyed. He could hardly wait for the day to come around. And so when that day arrived, he wrapped himself in an orange cloth, and in the earliest hours of the morning he went to the temple before anyone had arrived, and he found himself a place. Soon the great saints and sages and sadhus from all around came together. And as they did, each one sat down in lotus position and began to chant many different chants. So Ranjit was very concerned. He was afraid that they would pick him as a fraud. So he decided that he must chant too, but he wasn't a religious man. He'd never been to a temple before. But somehow, as he said, something arose from deep, deep within him. The sound of Ram. Ram rose up from the depths of his being and reached his lips, so he began to intone, "Ram, Jai Ram, Ram." And his chant joined with the chants of the other sages, sadhus and saints. And the time came for the princess to arrive, and she immediately recognized Ranjit. And as she went from saint to saint, from sage to sage, she finally came and touched Ranjit on the shoulders, whispered in his ear, I'm here, I'm here. What is it that you want to say to me? But by this time, Ram resonated in every atom of Ranjit's body, joining with the chants of all the other saints to become one sound, one resonating sound. Even the voice of the princess, her perfume, her touch melded into the unified sound of the chants, falling, merging, uniting with the inner sound of Ram, Ram. The princess was frustrated, and seeing that she was not going to get any response, she moved on to the other saints and sages, and finally, after all the alms were given, she left the temple. The day passed, and saint after saint rose from their lotus position and left the temple. Ranjit remained. Ram still resonating, until finally even the sound of Ram disappeared from his being. His wife came, calling to him, "Come, it's time to return home." But the sound of her voice merged in the silence, the deep silence that remained within Ranjit until she finally left, leaving Ranjit in the deep, deep silence that remained. The question's been asked and is asked again. To where does your mind return when the task or reality of life's play, one completed and another not yet begun, where does your mind return to in the space in between? Where does your mind come to rest? Does it still need a roost? What is it that the silence contains? Mind, the movement of life. Brahm. Where is there an inner and an outer now? Where is there a microcosm or a macrocosm? Where is there a center or a parameter? Where is there a dividing line between existence and non-existence? Where is there a difference between the movement of life and the stillness of presence? In this place, there is no paradox.